In the working-class town of Heyville, Pennsylvania, a 9-year-old Latina girl vanishes from a playground in the summer of 2000. The system turns a blind eye, dismissing the case as just another story from the wrong side of town. But 12 years later, a dying mailman steps forward with a buried truth. Will it help bring the girl home? Before we start, please help me get to 1,000 subscribers. And right where are you watching this video from? August 2000, Heyville, Pennsylvania. The sun hung low and heavy above Heyville like a ripe orange suspended in syrup, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and rusting chain-link fences. It was one of those late summer days that felt like it might never end. All golden light, sticky popsicle fingers, and the smell of grilled meat curling through the air from every porch cookout. In the distance, a lawn sprinkler made a rhythmic CHK, and kids' laughter echoed like birdsong across the faded wooden structures of the town's only playground. Maria Velasquez, 9 years old and full of fire, swung from the monkey bars with a fierce determination, her red ribbon fluttering in her curly dark hair like a flame caught in the breeze. She was small for her age, but wiry, strong. The other kids adored her. She was the kind who made dare sound like poetry. Her sandals were dusty, her white shirt smudged with dirt and the remnants of blue snow-cone syrup. 5 more minutes, then home, she shouted to no one in particular, already negotiating with the rules set earlier that morning. Just past the far edge of the playground, tucked between overgrown hedges and a crooked elm, stood Harold Mitchell. His blue USPS uniform was damp with sweat, and his cap clung to his brow as he watched the scene with a quiet sort of reverence. At 58, Harold had walked this route for over 3 decades. His knees ached, but the familiar shuffle of feet on pavement and the clatter of mailboxes kept him going. He sipped warm water from a plastic bottle and squinted against the sun. Something dark moved at the corner of his vision. A black van had pulled up across the street from the playground. No logos, no windows, its paint dull and smudged like an old bruise. Harold frowned. There was no driveway there, no house nearby, just a disused maintenance shed and a line of utility poles. He watched as the van idled. Inside, someone moved. A shape, too vague to be identified, too still to be innocent. A flicker of recognition prickled his spine, though he couldn't say why. He glanced back toward the playground. Maria had stopped swinging. She stood still, 1 foot on the gravel, looking in the van's direction. A low hum filled his ears. Harold tightened his grip on the mailbag strap. Then, a sudden gust of wind lifted the ribbon from Maria's hair. It danced through the air like a red bird, looping, soaring, before landing against the curb near the van. Harold stepped forward, and then stopped. Voices shouted from the backyard behind him. Mrs. Klein's boys were arguing about a stolen baseball. A screen door slammed. Harold looked back at the playground. Maria was gone. Just for a moment, she was gone. Then she reappeared near the swings, skipping back with that same ribbon in hand, tying it back with clumsy fingers. Harold exhaled, told himself he was imagining things. That black vans weren't always a warning sign. That not every chill meant something was wrong. Still, he made a mental note. Later that night, he wouldn't write it down. He wouldn't call in. He would dream about the ribbon, red, bright as blood, twisting in the wind. And 12 years would pass before he'd speak of it again. August 2000, Heyville, Pennsylvania. Carmen Velasquez leaned on the mop handle for a moment, her back aching beneath the weight of a 12-hour double shift. Her hands were cracked from bleach. She wore the same uniform she'd had for 3 years. The patch above her chest that read Cafe Luisa was faded almost white. The kitchen behind her hissed with steam and shouted orders. Outside, the sun had already begun to sink. She glanced at the clock. 6:12 p.m. Maria should have been home by now. The cafe owner, Luisa, noticed her pause. "You can go," she said gently. "You've been on your feet since dawn." Carmen nodded gratefully, slipping out of her apron and into the warm dusk. Her body moved on instinct toward their apartment, 3 blocks past the church, left at the gas station with the broken sign, up a narrow stairwell that always smelled faintly of burnt toast and incense. But when she reached the door, it was locked from the outside. No sign of Maria. She checked the mailbox. Empty. She checked the stairwell. Nothing. Just give her 5 minutes, Carmen muttered. She probably stopped at Rosa's for candy. 5 minutes became 10. Then 20. By 6:45, Carmen had knocked on Rosa's door. Rosa, a heavy-set woman in slippers and hair curlers, shook her head. No, Mija. Not since lunch. She came for a soda, but left right after. Said she was heading to the playground. Carmen's heart dropped. They moved together now, knocking on more doors, calling out into alleyways. Mr. Jenkins, who fixed bicycles, said he saw Maria near the swings around 4. Ms. De Leon said she waved at her from the porch. And then, nothing. By 7:30, Carmen was in full panic. Her legs trembled as she ran, retracing her daughter's usual route. The streetlights flickered on. The air turned heavier, sour with fear. She called the police from a payphone near the bodega. Her voice cracked as she spelled Maria's name. Age? The dispatcher asked, almost bored. 9. Any history of running away? No. She's just a kid. Any issues at home? With the father? Carmen hesitated. He left us when she was 3. He's in Texas. She's never even spoken to him. A pause on the line, then a long sigh. We'll send someone by. By 9 o'clock, a patrol car pulled up. 2 white officers stepped out, one young and chewing gum, the other older, with deep creases at the corners of his eyes. They asked questions with clipped words, took notes without looking up. She might have gone to find her dad, the older one finally said, shrugging. It happens. Sometimes they show up at a bus station. No, Carmen whispered, almost too soft to hear. You don't understand. Maria wouldn't do that. She's strong-willed, right? The young one added. These kids, they have tempers. These kids. Carmen's voice rose for the first time. What do you mean these? They didn't answer. The report was filed. A missing child notice was stapled to a bulletin board behind the police desk. It wouldn't be entered into the national database until 3 days later. By then, the playground had been washed clean by a summer storm. The ribbon, red and vivid, had disappeared. Carmen stayed awake that entire night, sitting by the window, staring out into the silence of the street. Every pair of headlights made her heart jump. In her mind, she kept seeing Maria's smile. Missing front tooth, sticky with sugar, unstoppable. She clutched a small plastic bracelet Maria had made for her last Christmas, the bead spelling Emon in crooked letters. That was the last night she would ever sleep without nightmares. The last night before the world became divided in two, before and after. August 2000, Heyville, Pennsylvania. The mail sat unopened on Harold Mitchell's kitchen table. Bills, supermarket coupons, a letter from his sister in Virginia. But Harold just stared past them, into the birdcage in the corner of the room. Inside, a canary, bright yellow and too quiet, shifted on its perch and ruffled its feathers. You gonna sing today, Daisy? He murmured. The bird tilted its head, unblinking, silent. He leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning beneath his weight, and shut his eyes. The image was still sharp. The black van, the ribbon, the sudden, impossible stillness at the playground. He could recall the engine's idle, the dull metal glint of the vehicle in the sun, the shape of the driver's shoulders. And now, the posters. Maria Velasquez. Missing. Age 9. He'd seen one tacked onto the door of the post office that morning. Someone had drawn a red heart next to her name. Harold had carried letters through 3 mayors, 5 snowstorms, and countless family dramas. He knew every porch and dog on Maple Street by heart. But this was something else. He saw the van again in his mind. Not just any van. It belonged to Conrad Grayson. The name still made his stomach tighten. Conrad was a developer, the kind who smiled for ribbon cuttings, shook hands with senators, and spoke at city council meetings with polished ease. He funded campaigns, owned half the commercial strip downtown, and had a knack for making zoning laws bend like soft clay. Harold had delivered mail to Grayson's office twice a week. He'd seen him, tall, gray-haired, with eyes too cold for someone always smiling. And the van, the same one he used to move equipment between sites, parked right there, next to the playground. But what did Harold know? He was just a letter carrier. I'm not a cop, Doc. I didn't see him touch her. His hands trembled as he folded the mail away. I'm just a mailman, he said aloud to the empty kitchen. Who's going to believe me over someone like him? 20 and 1 minus 20 and 5. Heyville, Pennsylvania. The file on Maria Velasquez sat buried in a dented cabinet on the second floor of the Heyville Police Department. Officially, the case was open. Unofficially, it was a name no one wanted to say out loud anymore. Every time Carmen asked for an update, the answer was the same. We'll let you know if something comes up. Nothing ever came up. In the months after Maria disappeared, Carmen visited the station weekly, then monthly, then only on the anniversaries. The looks on the officers' faces grew colder with time, their words sharper, shorter. Maybe she ran off, ma'am. You sure she wasn't having trouble at school? We're doing everything we can. Carmen didn't believe that. Not anymore. Her days became a loop, cleaning houses in the morning, working nights at the laundromat. She lost her job at the cafe in 2002. The owner told her gently, "You cry too much in front of the customers." I'm losing everything, she thought. I already lost her. Now I'm losing myself. Heyville used to be a tight-knit town, the kind where people left their doors unlocked and knew your dog's name. But in the years after Maria's disappearance, it grew quiet, suspicious, closed, especially in the Latino community. There were whispers about a black van, about men with money who could make you disappear. But no one dared speak publicly. No one wanted to end up in trouble, or worse. Not in a town where power wore a white shirt and a silver pen. "Let it go, Carmen," her neighbor Inez would whisper. "You still have a life. Don't throw it away for the dead." "She's not dead," Carmen would reply, her voice dull, automatic. But even she wasn't sure anymore. In 2003, the Heyville Gazette ran a short column on page 3, "Missing Child," just another story from the poor side of town. There was no photo of Maria, no mention of the failed police response, no note about Carmen's hundreds of letters, to the mayor, to local news stations, even the governor's office. Just one quote from a police spokesman: "We believe the child ran away. No evidence suggests foul play." And just like that, her daughter became a statistic. Sometimes, driving home from her shift, Carmen would listen to old Spanish songs on the radio. One of them, "Volver, Volver," always made her cry. She gripped the steering wheel, crying quietly at red lights, the empty passenger seat glowing under the dashboard light. Meanwhile, Conrad Grayson, the developer, was cutting ribbons on new apartment buildings and handing out campaign checks downtown. No one mentioned the little girl who vanished near one of his construction sites. 12 bus stops away, on the edges of town, posters of Maria, peeled and faded under rain and summer heat. And the world moved on. Just not for Carmen. Heyville, Pennsylvania, 2012. The hospital rooms smelled of antiseptic and warm plastic, the sterile scent of waiting rooms, slow, beeping monitors, and endings. Harold Mitchell sat in a thin robe, sunlight from the window warming the edges of the bedspread. The doctor had just left. Stage 4 lung cancer. 3, maybe 4 months left. Harold didn't cry. He'd suspected it for a while. The weight loss, the coughing that scraped like broken glass. What struck him more than fear was a curious lightness, as if someone had finally turned down the volume in his mind. He sipped water, watched the trees sway outside, and thought of Maria Velasquez. She would be 21 now, if she was still alive. That red ribbon had never left his mind, nor had the van, nor the guilt that had grown inside him like rust under paint, slow, invisible, and absolute. "I kept quiet," he muttered aloud, "and now I'm running out of time to fix it." That night, he didn't go home. He went to church. It had been years. The pews were as stiff as ever. The stained glass window above the altar glowed in the low light. A lamb in the arms of a shepherd, eyes wide with knowing. Harold sat in the back row, hands clasped. The silence wrapped around him. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I was afraid." No voice answered. No thunder. Just the creak of the building and the distant sound of a janitor sweeping the vestibule. But when he left, his feet knew where to go. At the Heyville Police Department, the cold case division had recently been moved to a dusty basement room, mostly forgotten. But someone had new keys now. Detective Lorraine Edwards, Lori to her friends, but still Detective Edwards to most, had only been in Heyville for 6 months. Originally from Philadelphia, she transferred after a high-profile child exploitation case had left her burned out but relentless. She was sharp-eyed, measured, with coffee-dark skin and a braid that felt like a whip down her back. Many in town didn't know what to make of her. A black woman in a badge, in a place where old white men still ran City Hall. But she knew how to listen. So when Harold Mitchell shuffled into the station 2 days later, pale, slow, eyes rimmed in red, she saw something behind the weariness. Guilt. The kind that doesn't go away. "I need to tell someone something," he said. She invited him to sit. Listen as he told his story about the playground, the black van, the red ribbon, and the man he believed was behind the wheel. He stopped more than once to cough. Apologized every time. When he finished, Lori didn't say anything at first. Instead, she pulled out the old case file. The box was faded, the documents brittle with time. She read the original report, saw the same vague phrases, no signs of abduction, possible runaway, no credible witnesses. She flipped through the photos, and then she saw it. A small item bagged and tagged, but never followed up on, a red ribbon. Found near the curb by a city sanitation worker 2 days after the disappearance, not far from where the van had been. Heyville, Pennsylvania, autumn 2012. The leaves had begun to turn. Rust red and ochre lined the gutters, and the air had that unmistakable bite of a Pennsylvania fall, sharp, smoky, and restless. Detective Lori Edwards pulled her coat tighter as she stepped out of her cruiser onto a crumbling side street in Heyville's industrial quarter. Once home to a row of auto shops and supply depots, it was now an overgrown ghost town of broken windows, graffiti, and rusting fences. 12 years ago, this had been prime real estate for redevelopment. Now, the only thing growing was silence. Harold had pointed it out on a faded map, his fingers trembling. "The van stopped here," he said, "right on Ridgeline Street, near the old tool and bolt warehouse. I remember, it was just across from the playground. No one ever parked there." Lori surveyed the warehouse now, its loading dock doors ajar, the company sign hanging by one final bolt like a broken tooth. Weeds had clawed their way through the asphalt. A murder of crows burst from the roof as she approached, the flap of wings echoing like a warning. Inside, the light from her flashlight sliced through the gloom. She moved carefully, her boots crunching over broken glass. The smell of mildew and oil hung thick in the air. Along one wall stood rows of abandoned shelves and decaying boxes. Her heart pounded, steady and slow. And then, something. A metal trunk, tucked in the corner, half buried under a tarp and a rotted pile of old office binders. Lori crouched, pulled it free. The lock was rusted shut, but brittle. With a single jerk from her crowbar, it snapped. Inside, old clothes, a pair of children's sneakers. And on top, a red ribbon, carefully sealed in a Ziploc bag. Next to it, a small spiral-bound notebook, pages wrinkled with time. On the cover, in bright marker, Maria's journal. The drawings inside were innocent, stick figures, smiley faces, a house with a tree. But one page stood out. It showed a van, black, with scribbled words underneath. "The man in the black car watched me again." Lori felt a chill run down her spine. She stood in silence, clutching the journal to her chest. Back at the lab, the DNA results took a week. The sneakers, the ribbon, and the bracelet all matched samples taken from Carmen years ago. There was no doubt. These were Maria's things, and they had been hidden deliberately, stored like secrets. When Lori returned to Harold's apartment to tell him, he was sitting in his chair, breathing through a nasal tube, Daisy's cage beside him. "She was there," Lori said softly. "You were right." Harold's eyes welled with tears. Not of joy, not yet, but of release. "I should have spoken sooner," he whispered. "I waited 12 years. You spoke now," Lori replied, "and that's what matters." Heyville, Pennsylvania, late autumn 2012. The deeper Detective Lori Edwards dug, the more the rot revealed itself. Property deeds, contracts, police donations, zoning exemptions rubber-stamped with a smile. All paths led back to one man, Conrad Grayson, real estate mogul, benefactor of civic causes, and Heyville's untouchable elite. To most, he was the face of progress. New buildings, revitalized districts, campaign contributions. But to Lori, trained to smell what others buried, it was a familiar stench. A power broker cloaked in charity. A predator wrapped in philanthropy. She sat alone in her small office, the early evening light slanting through the cracked blinds. Outside, the glass in her window, old, imperfect, carried spiderweb fractures along the edges. She'd meant to have it replaced, but now she couldn't look away from it. A system can look whole from the outside, she thought, but when the light hits it right, you see every break, every weakness, and she'd lived those cracks. Flashback. Philadelphia. 2006. Lori, fresh from the academy, full of purpose and edge, sat across from her supervisor after filing a complaint about mishandled evidence in a case involving a black girl from North Philly. The room had been cold. "Don't make it a race thing, Edwards," the lieutenant had said, not unkindly, just tired. "Sometimes bad stuff just happens." That girl's case was closed with no justice. A year later, Lori's younger sister, Danielle, disappeared. 2 weeks before her 18th birthday. The case had been treated like a runaway. No follow-up, no press, no real search. Danielle was never found. It became the wound Lori worked around, but never healed. Now, in Heyville, Lori saw the same shadows, same whispers, but this time she had a voice and a badge. She returned to Carmen Velasquez's apartment, carrying Maria's recovered belongings in a box. Carmen opened the door with hollow eyes, expecting disappointment. Lori stepped inside gently. "We found them," she said. "Her things." Carmen covered her mouth, dropping into a chair. Her hand shook as she pulled out the red ribbon, now protected in plastic. "She loved this," she whispered. Said it made her look like a superhero. "There's more," Lori said. "The man Harold saw. We believe it was Conrad Grayson. We're building the case now." Quietly, Carmen blinked. Disbelief painted her face. "You're telling me someone actually cares now? After all these years?" "I care," Lori said simply. "And I know what it's like not to be believed." Heyville, Pennsylvania, winter 2012. The courthouse was old. Red brick, pale marble columns, and the cold echo of too many injustices bouncing between its walls. But on this morning, it pulsed with something else. Anticipation, grief, and the sharpened edge of reckoning. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as State versus Conrad Grayson was called to order. Carmen sat in the front row, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached. Lori sat behind her, a quiet, steady presence. The room was filled with community members, some curious, some wary, and many who'd once turned away. Now they watched. At the center, frail in body but fierce in eyes, sat Harold Mitchell. He rose slowly when called. The oxygen tank wheezed beside him, and each step to the witness stand seemed carved from stone. But when he sat down and raised his right hand, the silence in the room was complete. "I saw the van," he began, voice raspy but firm. "August 23rd, 2000. I saw where it stopped. I saw her, Maria, and I saw that man's van." He pointed to Conrad Grayson, seated with an unflinching, performative calm. "I didn't speak up. I was afraid. He owned the town, the buildings, the people. He knew the judges, the cops. I'm sorry. I should have spoken sooner." A pause. Then, "But I'm speaking now." Gasps murmured through the gallery. But Harold wasn't done. 2 more witnesses were called that day. An elderly mechanic who had worked across the street. A former groundskeeper who saw a black van and a crying girl near the warehouse, but had kept silent, convinced no one would believe a brown-skinned child mattered enough. They both said the same thing. It was the same van, the same man. And then came the forensic evidence. Maria's ribbon, the drawings, the journal, and then the shock of discovery. Detectives had searched Grayson's estate. Behind a locked panel in the basement, a hidden chamber. Inside, boxes of personal items, a red jacket, a broken bracelet, photos, receipts from construction sites long since closed. Silent witnesses of other lives disrupted. The courtroom recoiled. The prosecution laid out a quiet pattern of predation, exploitation hidden behind community involvement, deals sealed behind charity dinners. Grayson's lawyer stammered, but the weight of testimony and truth grew too heavy. On the 5th day of trial, with sweat on his brow and his world collapsing, Conrad Grayson finally broke. I didn't mean to, he began, voice cracking. I didn't mean for her to die. A woman in the back screamed. Carmen, stone still, let out a quiet sob, sharp and cutting. Gasps turned into weeping. Lori stood slowly, watching the moment like a storm breaking. After all these years, a confession. Not just for Maria, but for all the others buried in silence. Justice had not come swiftly. But now, finally, it had come. The courtroom exhaled as the gavel fell. But early 2013, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Lori had just poured her first cup of coffee when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, out-of-county prefix. She almost let it go. Almost. Detective Edwards, a woman's voice asked. This is Director Klein from the Hazel Grove Youth Shelter in Pittsburgh. We think we may have someone you're looking for. Lori's hand went still. A teenage girl, registered as Ana Ruiz, had been living at the shelter for almost 3 years. She'd arrived without identification, alone, and deeply guarded. No family, no story that held up under pressure. But she was kind, kept to herself, drew obsessively in notebooks she never let anyone see. Until that week, when a new social worker asked to see her art. The drawings inside were unmistakable. Red ribbons, black vans, a house with a crooked tree, a mother with tired eyes and kind hands. Symbols Lori had seen once before, 1 year earlier, in a water-damaged spiral notebook found in a warehouse. The match was impossible to ignore. The girl was 17 now, thin but strong, her curls grown long and unruly. She sat across from Lori in a quiet room at the shelter, her eyes cautious but not afraid. You can call me Maria, she said at last. That was my name. Before. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She spoke in halting pieces, of how she'd been taken, of darkness, of being moved from place to place, locked doors, whispered threats, of another girl who hadn't made it, of the day she escaped, barefoot, running for blocks before collapsing outside a bus terminal. She never told anyone her real name. I thought, Maria looked down. I thought maybe no one wanted me back. Lori didn't speak right away. She simply reached into her coat pocket and handed her a laminated photo. Maria's eyes widened. Her fingertips brushed the image, a red ribbon tied to a lock of hair, a smile with a missing front tooth. My mother, she whispered. She never stopped looking, Lori said softly. That evening, Carmen stood frozen in the lobby of the shelter. Her fingers gripped the strap of her purse so tightly it dug into her skin. Lori stood beside her, but didn't speak. Then, the door opened. Maria stepped into the room like a whisper made flesh. Her eyes met her mother's. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Carmen crossed the space between them and dropped to her knees, arms wrapping tightly around her daughter's waist. She held her like someone trying to gather up broken time, like a prayer long forgotten and suddenly answered. Maria fell into her, trembling, not from fear, but from release. The ache in both their hearts spilling over in silent sobs. No headlines, no cameras, just a mother and daughter, whole again. The world outside carried on, as it always does. But in that room, for the first time in 12 long years, the silence no longer hurt. It healed. Spring 2013, Heyville, Pennsylvania. Harold Mitchell passed away, quietly, on a rainy morning in March. The hospice nurse said he smiled just before the end. He was buried beneath a sugar maple on the hill, near the old cemetery on the town's edge. There weren't many at the funeral. A few neighbors, a priest, and Lori Edwards standing in the back, hat in hand. But there was something else. Placed gently on his headstone was an envelope. Inside, a folded piece of paper and a simple red ribbon, tied into a loop. The letter read, Dear Mr. Harold, thank you for telling the truth. You saw me when no one else did. You gave me back my name. I'm not afraid anymore. I hope you are free now. Love, Maria. Spring came early that year. Maria Velasquez, 17 and rediscovered, wore her ribbon, now not in her hair, but around her wrist, woven into a bracelet Carmen had made for her during one of their long talks in therapy. Strong things bend, her mother had said softly, tying it. But they don't break. The healing was not simple. The nights were still hard, but they walked through them together, slowly, steadily, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing louder than they expected. Maria started painting. She painted playgrounds, trees, shadows, and light. Always light. Carmen found work in a local community center, where she began to help other mothers. One still waiting, one still searching. Detective Lori Edwards, too, had not stopped. Maria's case reopened others. It gave voice to those who'd stayed quiet for decades. Lori led a new task force now, one focused on cold cases involving missing children from marginalized communities. She knew too well the cost of silence. Her cracked window at the station had been replaced, but she kept the original glass in a frame on her desk, a reminder of what breaks and what shines through. And on a golden afternoon in May, the Heyville playground reopened. The paint was new, the fences were strong, the benches were replaced, and bright flowers grew near the slide. A plaque stood at the gate, in memory of those we lost, and in honor of those who returned. Children ran again, their laughter ringing out like chimes in the wind. Mothers watched. Fathers chatted on the sidelines. Teenagers volunteered as mentors. Maria stood near the edge, watching them play, sunlight dancing on the ribbon at her wrist. Carmen stood beside her, arm around her shoulder. "We made it back," Maria said softly. Carmen smiled. "And we're not alone anymore." Lori passed by then, pausing at the edge of the fence. Their eyes met. The detective, the mother, the child who became her own hero.